Good afternoon and welcome everyone to today's webinar and the very first session in our Salesforce Expert webinar series, How to Save Users 80% of Time in 2013. Today's webinar is hosted by Cloud Alliance Implementation and AppExchange partner Configuro. Just a few housekeeping items for today's webinar. The session today will last approximately 30 minutes with about 10 minutes towards the end for Q&A session with the audience. We will open today's discussion with discussion around the common challenges faced by Salesforce users. We'll introduce a new alternative solution that extends the power of Salesforce's standard list and related list views, followed by a live case study and demo from a customer. At any time during today's session, you can submit your questions throughout the webinar via the chat window at the right of your screen, or you can submit your questions via Twitter by using the hashtag Configuro or simply mentioning Configuro. A reminder that today's session is being recorded, and we will be distributing the replay to all who registered, which should be available tomorrow. Our expert presenters on today's webinar are Jeff Ober of Apartment Realty Advisors and Jeff Kennedy of Configuro. Jeff Ober is a project manager specializing in business process analysis and is responsible for rolling out all database applications and managing Salesforce users across his organization. Jeff Kennedy is a certified Force.com consultant and expert, having developed hundreds of custom applications for Salesforce customers across industries and products that enable dramatic increases in productivity, efficiency, and revenue. And with that, I will turn it over to Jeff Kennedy.
Hey, thanks, Kenya. Good day, everybody. We're really excited that we have an opportunity to talk about the grid and how that might help you in your business. So one of the things that we see quite commonly is, people that find that, they think that Salesforce, it takes too much work, too many clicks to do things in Salesforce. They'd rather spend their time, selling or marketing or whatever it is, that they do day by day. And, they're used to using things like Excel or notepads or whatever, and really just don't like the idea of spending a good portion of their day inside Salesforce. And so the grid really has a lot of features that go towards addressing those types of objections. Go ahead, Jimmy. Next one. So if you're a Salesforce user, then you'll be familiar with the standard list view and also the related list view, which is something that you'll see when you edit something like an account. And the list views are great, but they do have some limitations with respect to not being able to edit data directly in the list, and the fact that you can only see a certain number of records on any given screen, which means that you have to paginate through your results set. And so the grid has some features that make the managing data in lists more productive and more user-friendly. So here's what the grid looks like. You can think of the grid really as an alternative, as I said, to the Salesforce list view. You'll notice that the grid has a familiar Excel-like interface, which is something that users really like and feel comfortable with. Our customers are really passionate about using the grid because the grid enhances their day-to-day experience using Salesforce and allows them to get their work done much faster. So the grid can be used by all users and has value for admins, for example, business users, and even managers. So if I'm a sales guy and I need to log my calls set up my call list for the day and prioritize the people that I need to speak to. The grid has some features that will allow me to do that much faster. If I'm in marketing and my job is to manage leads and campaigns, the powerful capabilities that the grid offers in terms of list management will go really a long ways towards making their day a lot nicer. If I'm in customer service and I have a large amount of cases that I need to manage on a daily basis, I might need to prioritize those cases or reassign those cases. The grid has features that will help me as a customer service manager to do my job. And if I'm an executive and I need to, to look at the work that's being done by, my employees, and I might need to group that or summarize that work so that I can get insight on how my business is running. Again, the grid has features that will help me do my job as an executive. So again, right, the grid looks a lot like Salesforce, and one of the things that the grid does is it really consolidates and presents a lot more information on one screen, so that you don't have to load a bunch of pages in order to really see all the data that you're interested in looking at. The grid presents that all in one page. And one of the things that the grid does that users really like is that it's very dynamic in nature. So I can, dynamically search, multi-column filter, multi-column sort, thousands of records with just a few mouse clicks, and again, that happens all on the same screen. One of the things that users do in Salesforce quite a bit is export data out to Excel, primarily for the purpose of doing mass editing. And the grid has some very powerful features that allow you to do those mass edits, or bulk editing, if you will, right inside the grid. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, because the grid makes users more productive, it gives them the ability to do their job faster and easier. You've got happier users, and that's going to result in increased adoption and getting more data inside Salesforce. So with that, let's hear how Jeff Ober is using the grid at Array.
Yeah, and let me make sure I'm not on mute and talking to myself. Thumbs up on my audio?
Yeah.
All right, excellent. Okay, so Apartment Realty Advisors, let me just give you a little bit of context here, and let me maximize my screen. We'll talk about the grid that's on my screen in a little bit, but ARA is a company of brokers, or a company of salespeople. Just as you were, if you would hire a real estate agent to sell your home, people hire us to sell their apartment buildings. And we recently moved over to Salesforce, I don't know, it was probably about a year ago at this point. And the goal here is to get our 27 offices, there's about 250 of us, 27 offices across the country. Goal is to obviously get everyone on the same system, sharing information, and managing our deal flow. People in our database, give or take, these are potential investors, buyers and sellers of real estate. And as Jeff Kenny was talking about, there's certain limitations in Salesforce when you're dealing with a lot of data like that. And somebody explained it to me in a since we're working in the cloud, there's only so much information you can pull up and down at one time. And so what Salesforce does by default is it limits it. It puts it at top 10, top 50, and then you click on a list and you get more. And if you want to see more information, then you got to click again. And so there's certain limitations. And when we're trying to work around those limitations, we ended up trying to build a custom solution. This was before I knew about the grid. And you can go to the next slide. Yeah, and so we tried to build this custom solution using outsourced labor, and it got really complicated really fast. And the sort of story of how I came in contact with the grid was someone from Configuro called me because we had talked previously. He said, "Oh, how's your Salesforce?" I said, "Fine, fine, you know." He said, "Can we help you with anything?" And I said, "I got this problem," and I described the problem of updating a lot of information at once. And they say, "Oh, you know, we're working on this grid, and maybe this grid can help you out." And they showed it to me. I was like, "Wow, that's exactly what I want," because we're a finance-based industry. It's closely tied to the banking industry and the investment industry. And so everyone knows Excel, and everyone works in Excel. And what this slide you're looking at is showing us this sort of a process where what we'll do is we'll have an investment opportunity. We send it out to at least 3,000 to 5,000 people, sometimes more. And these are various investors throughout the country. And then our brokers get on the phone and they literally take that list, they sort those lists, they group those lists, they manipulate the data in all kinds of ways, and then they start making phone calls. And then when they're on the phone, they want to make notes, and they want to see related info right before they hit the call button. They want to see what other listings did I send this person. And what I'm going to be able to show you in the grid is you can get that all in a very quick view. Right at the hands. And so you make your notes and everything, and you send emails, and you do all these things with about 2,000 to 5,000 people at once, records at once. Okay, you can click the next one. So I guess that's my cue for the demo. So I'm going to get control. I just want to show you my grid, which is a customized grid. And while it's sort of switching over and loading up, and I've increased the font size so hopefully you guys can see it. I just want to talk about Configuro a little bit. They are they're the best partner I've worked with in Salesforce so far. They're extremely responsive, and they typically I don't spend nearly as much time going back and forth with requirements on them. They understood my process, and we're able to build something pretty slick, and I'll show you here. And so here's the grid, and of course you can sort it like Excel, front and back, and you can do a quick filter. And this is standard grid stuff. So there's Jeff, and when you clear it out, it clears out that. And we've got some assignments. So we assign brokers to a list. And so here's Jeff Patterson, suppose one of my partners, and suppose he wants to go in here and make phone calls. Well, here's his people, and if I click on this person, let me find a good record. Of course, yeah, there's a good record. So over here, I select the record, and I can make my phone calls or whatever. And I'll see over here on the right all the calls that I've made, which looks a little silly because I've blown up the screen of the font so that everyone can see it. But that shows all the calls that have been made on this particular assignment. And so when Jeff goes to make a phone call, he can see very quickly who made a call already and what was it regarding to. This particular one was a test record that I'm showing you. And suppose he goes to call Janet. Configuro built this personalized thing for me. If I click this button, I get a console that comes up, and this is a campaign that we're looking at. So you've got a status, and we can change the status of, I left a message or whatever the case is. And I can record a note. I can save that. I can move over here and do a follow-up task and assign it to myself or assign it to somebody in my group. Hey, send this person these financial statements or what have you. I could also send an email. And if I wanted to post an internal note, I can do that all within this little console they've built for me. And so I'm not going to save any of that, but I would hit save. The note would show up here. here's another really powerful function about it. If I go over to this other list, I can see what other campaigns, in this case, who this person's on. And so in our business, we've got the listings. We're probably talking to Janet about listing A, and then we can pop over here and select this other listing. And let me expand this out a little bit. And I can launch that little call wizard buddy thing, and I can do the same thing on those other listings, those other campaigns. And so very quickly, in my list, I can sort it. I can hone in. I can look at other things that are attached. There's some other things that you can do, like the chatter and events and attachments and things like that, and they can customize all that stuff for you. And then if I want to go back to the record, I could just hit this arrow thing here. Jeff Kennedy mentioned you can export to Excel, so we can take whatever we're doing in the Excel and export it. You can also really easily, I don't want to get too much into all the grid functions, but you can very easily hide and show the columns that are in there. I think that's it for my demo. I mean, I just mean it to be a very quick thing. I'm going to pass this back over to you. And, okay. Trying to quantify the benefit of this, I put a quick calculation together, and came out to be $70,000 a year, and that was trying to quantify what it costs, people's time, and I'll relay it like this. I was in my Florida office and talking to one of the executives, and I was showing him these things, and he said, "No, we've got a real-time process over here, and it's cutting edge, and why should we adopt this?" And I said, "Really? You have a real-time cutting-edge process?" And we called in the person who actually does the work. She goes, "Oh, no, that's not real-time. I do that behind the scenes in Excel. I spend hours on it, and I do it all manually." And so what he thought was real-time, automated, was really somebody doing it manually. So all that goes away. All that manual labor goes away, and we were able to, by my calculation, when I roll it all out, save as you can see in these figures, quite a bit of hours where you don't have to go take the data out into Excel, put the relevant data with it, use it, and then bring it back into the system. It's all right there in the system, and has some pretty significant time savings. That's it for that one.
Fantastic, Jeff. Well, your experience at ARA with the grid is very similar to the experiences that our other customers are having. And if you go on the AppExchange, you'll see some of the quotes. I think in many ways our users say it best. And they're very, very passionate about using the grid. And one of them, Ron, said, "Grid's an absolute game changer for Salesforce." He used the grid to update 30,000 records. He had some bad data in the database, and just could not figure out a way to do that using the traditional tools. And with the grid, he was able to do that in literally a matter of hours. Another quote there: "A genius tool." One of a very large company over in Europe, a pharmaceutical company, has automated their opportunity and quote processes using the grid, and have saved a really significant amount of time in executing that business process. And really, the experiences are just similar for every single customer that is using the grid. Basically, really dramatic productivity improvements. Users are much happier, and the ROI on this tool is just incredible. So a couple customers. One of the really nice things about the grid is it really can be applied to any type of business and any type of workflow. And I'll talk just a little bit about a few of those. So Stratix is using our grid to automate their revenue forecasting. And they're taking advantage of the multi-level grouping capability that we have in the grid to be able to roll up their forecast revenue. DME Automotive was a company that really had serious problems with respect to their backlog. So they process automobile warranty claims. And with the standard out-of-the-box Salesforce UI, they just couldn't get enough cases closed per day. They just didn't have the business velocity that they needed. And they had, I think it was giving about 25 or 35% increase in their productivity, and of course a resultant decrease in their operating costs. And so we have created some special business process automation for them, and of course they're using the cases option in Salesforce. Chipworks is a really interesting company. They're a bunch of engineers up in Canada, and they do patent investigation. And as a part of doing their patent investigations, they have to manage literally millions of pieces of information about patents. And they need a very rapid and dynamic way to access that information and to perform very sophisticated and complex searches across a very large database. And they're using our grid successfully for that. Control Scan is another one of our customers. We actually have a professional services automation application, which is very useful for companies that deliver services as a part of their core business. And that application is leveraging our grid technology and therefore getting all of the benefits of the multi-column filtering, sorting, and large data support. So just a few examples of the grid. Let me just in closing say that the grid was designed at the very start to be customized in all sorts of ways so that it could be applied across all these different types of businesses. And if you have a need for a productivity improvement solution and you think that the grid might be a path you want to explore, please talk to us and we'll describe how we can apply it to your business.
Great. And now we will start the Q&A portion of today's webcast. As previously mentioned, you all have a window to the right of your screen where you can submit your questions via chat, and we will be happy to answer those questions live now. I do see we have a lot of questions coming in, and if we don't make it to your question today, we will make sure to get your question answered via email after today's webcast is over. But before we go into the Q&A, there are a few next steps I'd like to review. If you're interested, if you're experiencing issues with user adoption, users complaining that it just takes too many steps and scrolls and clicks to do what they need to do in the standard out-of-the-box Salesforce, then there are a couple of ways that you can find out more about if the grid is a solution that might help you in your organization. The first way is a free 14-day trial is available on the AppExchange. You can simply search for grid, and you'll be able to pull that up. Administrator access is required to download the trial, but if you are not an administrator, then we are happy to schedule a 20-minute demo of the grid, and we can take you through a deeper dive of exactly how it works, all of the features that are available, custom buttons that can be built for your particular business. And you can sign up for that on the Configuro website at www.configuro.com and then go into the products page. We will also have a webinar replay that we will distribute, and we encourage you to share that with anyone on your team who is interested in finding out more about how this might impact their particular role. You can also see more use case videos of some of the use case examples that we've reviewed on our website on that grid product page. And as you see here at the bottom, we do have some pricing. The grid, if you're interested, is $10 per user per month, which I think a lot of people would say is a very small cost given some of the ROI figures that Jeff over reviewed today. We also have the mini grid, which is does exactly what the grid does, but within a related list. And then the data loader, which is a prerequisite for using these grid products, and that, of course, is free. So I'm going to go ahead and take some of our first questions here. It looks like we've got a question from Dan. Dan's question is, are there any risks to allowing end users to mass manipulate data? And that is a great question, which I will pose towards Jeff Kennedy.
Sure. So the Salesforce Grid respects and enforces all of the security that is in your standard Salesforce model. So anything that a user can do in Salesforce, they can also do in the grid. Anything that they cannot do in Salesforce, the grid will also prevent them from doing it. So it fully supports the Salesforce security.
Okay, and then another question from Dan, who's interested in knowing what is the minimum number of users needed, if any, to purchase the grid?
So the grid is licensed on a named user basis. So if you have 100 Salesforce licenses, but you only need to have one user use the grid, and you would just purchase a license.
Okay. Great. And then we have another question here from Christine, who wants to know, does the data loaded into the grid check for duplicates?
There are features that can be, actually let me answer that question a different way. So we have two products. We have the data loader product, which is really an alternative to the standard Salesforce data loader, and that would be a tool that you would use to put data into Salesforce. The grid is a tool that allows you to manage or operate data that's already in Salesforce. That being said, if you wanted to search for duplicate records, the grid has a number of features that would allow you to identify duplicate records. Some examples that come to mind are the powerful filtering capabilities, such as we support regular expression matching. And that's an incredibly powerful way to find records that are similar, for example, based on a string match.
Okay, great. And then we've got a question from Ryan, who says, creating and managing tasks on a daily basis is very essential for the organization's users. For managers to check the status of users' tasks, as well as users' ability to sort and update their tasks, is very cumbersome. Is Grid solution an easier way to manage tasks in Salesforce?
Absolutely. The Grid will work with any standard or custom object that's defined in your org. Essentially, when you load the Grid, it reads the metadata for your org, which would include all of these standard and custom objects that you have. So in the same way that you could use the Grid to increase your productivity in managing accounts or leads or opportunities, you certainly could also do that for tasks.
Okay, and from Kim, she wants to know, so can you confirm that it is possible to purchase the Grid for all of your Salesforce users, or is that required?
No, as I mentioned earlier, it's the Grid is licensed on a per named user basis. So only those users that need to have access to the Grid would need a license.
Okay, and then we've got another question. Can the Grid search across objects? For instance, searching people that are in our org as contacts or leads.
The Grid has the capability to search related objects, either parent or child. Let me give you an example, which may be more clear. So when I create a what we call a query panel, which is that thing that you see above the Grid, it's the search criteria that you're going to use to tell Salesforce what records you want to load into the Grid. I can have a search field, which is actually a lookup to a parent field. So if I'm searching for opportunities I can say I want opportunities only for accounts, let's say, that have a certain status. So I can look up to a parent object, a related parent object. In the same way, I could also look down to a child object. So in the case of opportunities, I could say, show me, I want to retrieve all opportunities that have an opportunity line item of product X. So the answer to your question is yes.
Okay, great. And then this question looks like it's specifically for Jeff Ober. Let's see. Rachel here wants to know, Jeff, how many records ARA is managing with the custom version of the grid that you showed earlier?
Okay, is my audio on?
Yes.
Excellent. I'm kind of retarded when it comes to that. Typically, we're using it as a grid for the campaign object, and a campaign will have as little as 5, but that's not very common, 5 records. Average 3,000, maybe more typical 5,000 records, and we've used it a couple times for, I think there's a couple of campaigns out there, 10,000 strong. It loads it really quick and sorts it really easily. But I would say like average 3,000 to 5,000 records at once.
Okay, great. And then we've got a question here from Gary, who wants to know, is data from the grid exportable, or can you create charts or put it into other places outside of Salesforce?
Sure. So we have, I think Jeff mentioned, we have a export button on the grid. So if you're looking at contacts or leads or opportunities or whatever, you can filter the data that you've loaded into the grid and then export that out to Excel, and it'll create a CSV file.
Okay. And we've got someone here who wants to know how and if this does address issues with page layouts. They mentioned they have a lot of tabs and often have to create a tab for each table. Can you speak to that?
Sure. So the grid has actually 3 different ways for you to edit data. It supports inline editing, which is a really nice feature. It supports mass editing, so you can edit multiple records at once. And the third way is it supports traditional, page type editing, like what you would do in Salesforce. So when you edit a record and you want to edit that whole record, the grid will produce a pop-up, and what's displayed in the pop-up is the Salesforce page layout. So what's really nice about that is that if you go in and customize your page layouts in Salesforce, maybe you add a new field or rearrange those fields, you're going to get that exact same presentation when you edit the record in the grid.
Great. And then we can take one more, and I know we are over our 1:30 ending time. This last question, can you post the code related to the customized console on your website?
So we do have an example on our website of how to create a custom button. And again, folks, the idea behind the custom buttons is to automate business processes that span multiple records. So an example might be if I'm managing cases, I might have 100 cases that I might want to transfer or reassign from one person to another. Rather than having to do that record by record, I can do that en masse by executing a business process across those multiple records.
Great. Okay, and we will close out today's webinar now. I do want everyone on the line to know that this is just the first in a series of Salesforce Experts webinars that we will be hosting over the next 3 months. And this is the first topic, but we will be tackling related lists and Force.com best practices in some of our upcoming sessions, and we'll hope you'll join us for those. If you do have additional questions, please remember you can submit those at any time via our Twitter, Configuro or @Configuro hashtag. You can also visit our website or contact us through the AppExchange. And for those of you that do have administrative access, of course, the best way to know if this grid is going to work for you and address some of the challenges that you're having with standard functionality, you'll want to get started with that 14-day trial, and we're happy to walk you through that in a 20-minute demo. We hope you have enjoyed today's session. We thank you all so much for your time, and we look forward to seeing you at a future event. Thanks, and have a wonderful afternoon.